welcome everybody. Thank you all for joining us. It's another week of available work for everybody here in Texas. So with us today, we're going to kind of just go around the table and introduce everybody here. Once again, my name is Joe Esparza. I'm the commissioner representing employers here at TWC, and let's go like we're dealing cards. Will?
Hi, my name is Will Lutz. I'm an economist with the Labor Market Information Department at TWC, and we are the keepers of the state's labor market statistics, which is a lot more interesting than it sounds.
It's Labor Market Information Day, folks. This is kind of a monthly briefing that we here at the commissioners do. Our Labor Market Information Department gives us, kind of breaks down aggregate data that we get from the Bureau of Land Statistics. What is it? The BLS, the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And it's kind of like opening Christmas every month to see kind of where we're at. Moving on to the next one, we have Katie McKee joining us today.
Yes. Good morning, Commissioner.
Hey, Katie.
Good morning, Will.
And as always, Chelsea's our engineer, acting our engineer. I wanted to kind of just housekeeping tidbits, as they say. We're going to just kind of move through. Usually, Katie is on the silent side of the microphone, but she's ever present and always kind of directing us. I'm counting on her to keep us on track, as they say, and we're just going to keep moving through this. So we're trying to make less work for Chelsea to have to edit these things and just be more efficient. So get used to it. We'll get better at it as the episodes go around. But yeah, Katie's going to keep us on track with time and on track with our subject data, and yeah, we can kind of get going. But Will, like I said, I've been excited about this. We've often talked about these briefings and what it's kind of a wealth of knowledge for the economy here in the state of Texas, and always appreciate you. Would you mind giving just kind of a quick rundown of name and title, but kind of your job duties, but also how did you find yourself in statistics in the labor market world?
Well, my name is Will Lutz, and job title is obviously economist. My career path, everybody's career path is a little bit unique. I studied economics in school, so I have a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in economics. And through a variety of events that occurred in my life, early in my life, I started out my career as a writer at the Capitol for about 13 years. And then I had happened to me what happens to a lot of people who get into that profession. I got laid off. And sometimes when you get laid off, you search a lot of things that you're qualified for. And I wound up here at TWC when a former commissioner representing employers named Tom Pauken invited me to join his staff and work on some of the education and employer issues that he was very interested in. And when Commissioner Pauken left the agency, they saw that I had a background in economics, and they thought I would be a good fit in our economics and our economic research enterprise here at TWC, which we call Labor Market Information. So I learned a lot about the economy. Again, I had studied it in school, but it was a peripheral part of my career for the first few years that I did that. And then I wound up here at TWC, and then all that stuff that I studied in school suddenly came back to me and became kind of front and center in my daily job and career. And what this is really all about, yes, we deal a lot with numbers at LMI, but what it really is about is telling your story. Numbers are another way to tell your story. And here in Texas, we have a story to tell, and of course the employers of our state deserve a lot of credit for that. Sometimes we get the data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics and we look at it and say, is it really this good? Did we get that right?
Oh, yeah, lately.
I'd much rather have that issue than a lot of other issues one could have.
Yeah.
But every region of this state is unique. And one of the things that's interesting about what I do is when you see what people do for a living, you learn a lot about the different parts of the state. So yes, we deal with numbers, but numbers alone are just digits. When you take numbers with a real-world understanding of communities and the business world, that's a powerful combination. When I talk to employer groups, I often say, you know a whole lot more about your communities and your economy than you think you do. You know a lot more about your labor market What a lot of our data helps you do is maybe look at a couple things you haven't noticed previously, and also give you a statistic you can cite that quantifies, that says, don't just take my word for it, here's the official data, what you probably see every day in your community.
Yeah, well put. And I used to think of this as kind of your it's almost like a monthly checkup when it comes to the health of the state and the health of the economy. And there's a lot of metrics that we'll talk about. Obviously, our employment rate, the labor force participation rate, the jobs gap, the postings, and these are great numbers that we are able to see. And just like anything, I'm probably due for an annual checkup that I haven't probably scheduled. I keep wanting to schedule, and it keeps getting pushed back. But you generally know the health of the state or the economy, just like yourself, if from metrics and things that are surrounding you. We always kind of continue to tout job growth, and we know that we're doing all we can to find new programs and to pull resources into creating more of the workforce available to take up those job postings that we're trying to push. So upskills and all the programs that we fund, for initiatives to get more people into the workforce. But when it comes to the actual data, this is, we always kind of say it's like this is, Will, you're the guy that reads the tea leaves, but more scientifically, right? With statistics when it comes to it. Let's talk about how, in general terms, how does labor market information impact like business decisions for our employers here in the state of Texas?
There are three things I would mention in terms of how this might be directly related to your bottom line. The first is it'll give you a general idea what's going on with the economy. We're not exempt from what's going on in the rest of the world. During the Great Recession, the Texas employment market had challenges. That's a statistical fact. I think we probably weathered them better than a lot of places did, but we had challenges. And it is important to not ignore them. You don't make problems go away by ignoring them. So first, it gives you a general big picture view of how the economy works, what's going on with the labor market in particular. The second thing it can do is I think it's helpful to know the industry makeup of your community, and most people, at least anecdotally, do. But if you know what industries, what types of companies employ people in your area, that can tell you who your customers are. That can be especially important for businesses that are doing retailing or wholesaling to just get an idea of who your customers are and how they relate to what their needs are. The third thing we do is we have wages by occupation. So you can look at our average wage data and see whether what you're paying for individual positions you might have at your company is consistent with what the market in your area is demanding, so that when you evaluate your compensation structure, you can see, is this realistic? Is this consistent with the market? Now, obviously, averages are just that, and I'm sure a lot of our employers have above average employees and are happy to pay them above average. You always have to look at the qualifications of the individual worker, and there are obviously a lot of factors, both quantitative and qualitative, that are considered in compensation decisions, but at least knowing what the average is in your area can help inform that discussion and make sure that you're making good, objective business decisions. And there are a lot of different ways you can slice and dice our data, and we're here to help.
Yeah. Let's kind of begin at the beginning then. Where do the numbers come from?
The numbers come from two places. There is a federal agency called the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and our programs are basically conducted the same way in all 50 states and the territories so that they can be compared. You can take our data and compare it with other states and territories. So the Bureau of Labor Statistics is one of the agencies that helps generate this data, and they come largely from two sources. The first is your unemployment tax records. So when you submit and you pay your unemployment taxes, some of the information in your tax report in a non-personally identifiable form. We don't give out information about individual companies, but the aggregates, the totals economy-wide, go into our data programs and help us understand how many people are working in Texas, where they're working, what industries they're working in. So one source would be tax records. Another source is surveys. To supplement the information we get off taxes, because not everything we want to know about the economy can be discerned from what you have to file to pay your taxes. We ask businesses to help us, tell us how many people they have working for them and what they're doing and what they're being paid. Any information about a specific person or company is confidential by law. But we do surveys so we can produce the totals to help everybody understand the economy better. So basically we have two main sources, tax records and surveys.
That's all. What are kind of the top data points that we're looking for? Obviously, we're always looking at the employment rate and the labor force participation rate. What are you tracking, and what's most helpful for either businesses or organizations out there to look at?
The metric that gets all the press is the unemployment rate,
Right.
And it's an important metric because it does give us a general idea of the labor market. But I actually think employment data, where people are working, is as or more interesting than unemployment data. So in terms of for an individual business, I would say the two things that I would start off with is we do have our main data website is texaslmi.com. So all of our data that in aggregate form, totals basically, is public. You can go there, you can download the data, you can work with the data, and it's offered to the general public. But at texaslmi.com, we have some quick reference profiles for the state as a whole and also for individual regions of the state, either by metro area or by workforce development area. And one of the things we put in there is a pie chart by industry. Main industry sector. We can't get too deep into the weeds of what is the composition of employment in your area. And I think that can tell you something because, like I mentioned earlier, it gives you an idea who your customers are.
Yeah.
In some parts of the state, manufacturing is a higher concentration of employment than in other parts of the state. In some parts of the state, professional and business services and some of what a lot of people would call technology, which actually lives in several different industries, are a major driver of the economy, and it kind of helps to know that. So that's one place to start is kind of the big picture of your economy.
Right.
I also think our occupational wage data can be very helpful to businesses because that takes a look at different occupations, like what is the average wage of an accountant or a registered nurse. Pick any occupation you want, and it'll tell you how many people are working in a particular region in that occupation. And it also looks at the average wage and the median wage and different percentile wages. And just for those who don't deal with statistics every day, most people who went to grade school are familiar with an average because it's usually how your grade is calculated, but you just add everybody up and divide by the number of people. That'll give you an arithmetic average or a mean, to use the statistical term. Median is you line all of the numbers up from smallest to largest, and you pick the one in the middle. Statewide in Texas, that is a 5-figure difference in terms of wages. So there is a 5-figure difference between the mean and the median because some of our high wage earners boost that average up. So sometimes when you're looking at business decisions and you're saying, what is a good benchmark if I'm looking at what I might start as a salary offer, you probably have to make a decision whether you want to base it on the mean or the median. And some of that will be factors specific to your business. I can tell you what the data is, but that's why I said data helps inform business decisions, but it takes that combination of the data and information that we provide objectively plus the individual business leaders' knowledge of their communities and their industry. You put those two together and you got a great combination.
Yeah. So you'd mentioned kind of regionally, and when we're briefed at the commissioner's level, we look at the we look at the regional areas. The acronym is another acronym I'm missing out on right now. But it's basically the metropolitan areas all across the state of Texas, and they're broken into those economic regions. The idea here is employment rates are pushing different regions higher, and I feel like this is something that the site selection groups that are looking for any expansion, or if businesses are moving, or if they're wanting to take advantage of an economy or a local workforce that meets their needs, they're looking to these statistics and helping them make those decisions. Is that pretty fair to say?
It absolutely is fair. And we have data that we collect on employment. So who is working, who is looking for work, how much are they being paid? Sometimes when people look at site selection decisions, because I have had site selection folks contact me every now and then, they'll supplement it with other data like educational attainment, which comes from the census. So that'll tell you what portion of people in a county have a high school diploma, or what portion might have a bachelor's degree. Which can sometimes be important depending on the industry. Sometimes they'll also look at job posting data, but remember that not all jobs are posted. So the Bureau of Labor Statistics does not do job posting data. We get that from a third-party vendor. We have some of that information on our labor market website. But that is also something that some people look at.
Yeah.
So sometimes people will take other data about a community like cost of living, real estate prices. Sometimes I've heard site selection people take a look at that.
Right.
And it informs the whole picture. And cost of living is important. And I think another point you made that is worth emphasizing is pay rates do differ by community. Some of that is a function of cost of living. 70% of the civilian labor force, more than 70% of the civilian labor force of Texas lives in 4 metropolitan areas. Dallas, Fort Worth, Arlington, Austin, Round Rock, San Antonio, New Braunfels, and Houston, the Woodlands, Sugarlands. So those 4 metropolitan areas make up greater than 70% of the civilian labor force of Texas.
Right.
Their wage structures, because of cost of living, are a little different than some other parts of the state. So particularly in some of our rural areas, I think it is important to look at the wage market where you are, because it can differ even within those, even in the big 4 areas between them. That can be a very local conversation. And that's why we produce not only statewide data, we also produce data for all of our metropolitan statistical areas, which are defined by the Census Bureau and the Office of Management and Budget at the federal level, and also for our workforce development areas, for those of you who are familiar with our workforce areas.
That was the acronym. That was it right there. WDA.
And for example, within the Dallas area, we actually have 3 workforce boards that cover that area. We have Dallas County is its own workforce board, Tarrant County is its own workforce board, and then the surrounding counties are in North Central. And the wage structure can differ within that metro area between Dallas and Tarrant County and some of the surrounding counties. A lot of our data, particularly survey-based data, requires larger numbers to have statistically valid data. So I often comment the larger the area, the more data you're likely to have. But with that caveat, so sometimes we don't get individual county data. Sometimes we only have regional data. But I still think that regional data can be very useful just because of the differences in the economy in different parts of the state.
Right. So are businesses, are they just filling out these surveys at the goodness of their heart? Are they requested? Are they tracked? And let's talk about the timing of the data. How old is the data when it comes to, publishing a report on the monthly time?
Well, first, to understand the economy, we rely on the good faith the good faith of our business community. Now, some of our data programs, it is absolutely true, we do get from tax records, particularly our industry data. But when filing your taxes, we don't have as much information right now about occupations. So the Bureau of Labor Statistics, in cooperation with TWC, conducts a survey on the occupational employment and wages. And so we do contact businesses first by mail and then also by phone. We ask you to tell us how many people you have in a given occupation and your pay scale. What are you paying them? We've made that survey as simple as possible so that it is easy for people to fill out and the response burden is low. But it is really important for us. We need that cooperation to provide good information to Texans and to other businesses on what is going on with the economy. So we really appreciate your cooperation. So when you get a survey from the Bureau of Labor Statistics or from TWC, please fill it out. Because the voluntary cooperation of businesses is essential for us to have a good understanding of the economy. There are federal and state laws that protect your individual business information. We only give out the totals, the aggregates. We cannot, by law, give out information on an individual wage earner or an individual company, because I know protecting proprietary information is very important in some industries and to some members of the business community, and we respect that, and there are some strict federal and state laws that are in place to make sure that sensitive business information is protected and not given out inappropriately. So information about your business is confidential by law, but please fill our surveys out. It's important. And you mentioned you had a second question.
I think it was timing. How old is this? How old is the data? Maybe I'm not sure if we can talk about when you fill out a survey. Is that for the next month's numbers? Is that current? Is it a current snapshot? How fresh is the data when it comes to them releasing it to us to monkey with?
And I'm going to answer it somewhat generally to avoid getting too much into the weeds.
Oh yeah,
here.
no. Yeah, I'm trying to drag us into the weeds, and Katie's looking at me.
The short version of your answer is it depends on the data program that the survey is looking at, because there's a data program that helps produce monthly data, and there's a data program that produces data on an annual basis, and there are surveys that contribute to both. The Bureau of Labor Statistics takes an industry survey on industry employment that helps feed into our monthly employment counts by industry.
Okay.
Our occupational employment and wage survey, that data is released annually, just to make sure we have enough data in there so that it's really good, high-quality data. So some of our data programs are monthly, some of our data programs are quarterly, and some of our data programs are annual. And a lot of that depends on the type of collection and the type of data that we have, because we want to make sure that any data we release is statistically of really good quality.
Right. And so the LMI stuff that we get, that we provide, that all comes from the federal side. The BLS provides this information. In the state of Texas, our comptroller also has some information that they also provide to supplement our reports. Is that correct? Are they looking at? They're probably looking more at wage.
The comptroller does have a lot of really good data resources that also help us understand the economy. Obviously, one of the main duties of the comptroller's office is to estimate the revenue the state of Texas receives. So our information that we release at TWC comes both from TWC itself, like your unemployment tax filings. We also have a role in conducting some of the surveys. BLS conducts some of the surveys. We follow BLS's methodology so that our data is comparable with the other 49 states and is actually factored into the national numbers that are released. The comptroller uses a lot of the data that we and BLS collect. I mean, you'll see some of the data not just on our website, but also on the comptroller's website. But the comptroller also looks a lot at gross state product, which is produced by, in part, the Bureau of Economic Analysis, which is a part of the Federal Department of Commerce. I'm trying to avoid too much of an alphabet soup of agencies
no
here.
problem. Yeah.
They also have some data that they collect on their own about revenue trends and other trends within the Texas economy that they publish. So yes, we do look at some of what the comptroller does, particularly some of their gross state product data, which is related but distinct from some of the labor market data we look at. So we look at who's being employed, what industries, what occupations, what are their wages like, and what are the aggregate totals in the economy. Gross state product will give you the dollar value of economic activity. Again, I believe the two are absolutely related, but they are somewhat distinct concepts, and both can help us get that big picture. The other data that I like to look at is cost of living data, which can include real estate data. Texas A&M has a real estate research center that puts out a lot of information on the housing market in Texas. And there are other measures of cost of living that are also things that people factor in to understanding the economy better.
Let's talk about our stakeholders. So who are kind of the more prominent organizations, and maybe it's our workforce development group, solution boards out there. Who's pulling data from us, and how are they using it at their local levels?
Our customers are a wide variety of people. It's hard to characterize them with a broad brush, and anybody can visit our website. So while we can kind of track a little bit of our website hits, we know a lot more about who calls us.
Yeah.
We definitely deal a lot with our local workforce boards. And a lot of what I do is working with our boards to help them understand their the economy and how they can take this data to help people who are particularly seeking jobs or businesses or trying to find labor make good decisions. So I definitely spend a lot of time with our local workforce boards. But we get calls from employers. We get calls from site selection consultants. We get calls from elected officials. Frequently call our governmental relations folks at TWC with questions about their area. So we often assist governmental relations in filling those requests from elected officials. We also hear from local elected officials. I hear from local units of government frequently.
Right.
Interested about what might be going on in their city or county or their region. Academics. We also get a lot of interest from academics who use or study our data. Educators. One of the things, and I've seen this even in recent years, there's a lot more interest in educators in understanding the economy because they really want to make sure that the career and technology education programs they're offering are related to the needs of employers in their community. And I think that has been a significant increase in that activity probably in the last decade or decade and a half, where we're not just doing what we've always done. The education community is reaching out a lot more to the employer community and saying, are the things we're offering meeting your needs? And so sometimes I get conversations with educators about the local community, both the K-12 level and the community college level in particular. So it is a wide variety of people that we would consider our customers for labor market data.
Yeah. How often do you get requested to go speak to groups here? Is any government, local government groups that are asking for kind of like our 101 or anything like that?
I mean, obviously our first priority is going to be within the workforce system.
Yes, sir.
With that caveat, reasonably frequently. I mean, it kind of comes and goes. It kind of depends on a little bit of the season. For better or for worse, COVID really increased a lot of the interest in what we do because there was so much change in the economy that people really needed to understand what's going on. You know, the things we've been doing the last 10 years, we had to look and see where things were now. But it really varies by what's going on in the economy. And again, it's a wide variety of groups that have interest in what we do.
That's awesome. Yeah, Will, and again, the biggest reason I was really excited when we started talking about this podcast was the ability to bring you on. So I had this episode in mind a long time ago because it was something that, I've reached out and had, different questions, mostly on how the, our employment rate, where it's at, and how it's affected by the other factors like the workforce participation rate and what that really means. And we definitely could get really in the details. But what I want to provide was this episode for folks out there to get a very high level understanding of what LMI is. And kudos to you, government officials, local elected officials, and all of those business community groups that are pulling this information and that are looking at what's going on in their world and how it relates to the rest of the state. Because one thing we like to do is we always compare how Texas is doing to the rest of the nation, right? That's a huge comparison to where we're at.
And what I would say on that, I would say two things. The first thing I would remind everybody is that with unemployment rates,
Right.
the denominator is actually people who are looking for a job.
Right.
So people who have given up, and we saw this
actively seeking. Right?
Yeah, actively
that's
seeking
the key word.
a job. So I often say that when you're looking at the unemployment rate, it's the denominator is either people who have a job or people who are actively looking for a job, not people who have given up. So what the employment rate tells you a little bit is, if I'm looking for a job, how easy is it? It's almost a measure of how easy is it to find employment. Because if that number's really high, then you have a lot of people who are looking who are not succeeding in finding employment. If that number's really low, then people who opt into our labor market are finding employment. So it is important when you're looking at the unemployment rate to remember the numerator and what the numerator and the denominator are, to use a high school math analogy.
And thank you for that.
But I would also say that the one of the I've often said that employment data, and I mentioned it earlier in this podcast, is as or more interesting than unemployment data in this sense. One of the things we look at a lot is what is the over the year job growth
Change in growth.
compared to where we were last year. So a metric we use a lot is what percentage increase do we have in jobs this year from what we had at the same point last year? And right now it's about 2%, which is actually not quite as high as it was during the recovery from COVID. But 2% was roughly what we were doing prior to the COVID. You know, from the end of the Great Recession until COVID, that was about what we were doing. But when you think about it, that's net increase, and that's an amazing number.
Right.
Because to have a net increase in a job, if somebody gets laid off, you would have to create 2 new jobs to account for the net increase of the one person who got laid off. So 2%, a lot of states would love to even be close to that.
Right, yeah.
So one of the things we like to look at is that net change in employment, because I think that tells you a lot of, over the year, what is going on in the economy. And we also can break that down by industry and by region. Changes in the civilian labor force, which in the civilian labor force is people who are either employed or looking for work. Changes in the civilian labor force, which is a little bit of a related concept, is also noteworthy. And all of those can be done both at the statewide level and at the regional level. So I would say that in addition to the unemployment rate, which gets a lot of press and is an important measure once people realize what it is, I also think it's important to look at how we're doing on jobs. And the good news is most of the time I'm talking about good news.
Yeah, yeah.
And I enjoy that.
We've often talked about, you know, what conversations are happening in other states, and right now we definitely appreciate that, and we think that a lot of that has to do with you know our leaders in government and at the local level making those good decisions, and obviously using the labor market information to help guide them. Right.
Well, and I learn something every time I go out into another community. I mean, businesses will tell me things, or business leaders will tell me things about what they're seeing in their communities. And then I'll go look at the data and say, okay, does the data confirm that? And so every time I go out there, I learn something new about the state and about the different areas of the state and about the people that we all work for. And that's one of the most enjoyable parts of my job.
That's great. Will, I really appreciate it. Real quick, when do new numbers come out during the calendar year? Or
we release unemployment and labor force data monthly. Usually it is a Friday in the middle of the month. There's a change in the pattern in February and March, but other than those 2 months, a Friday in the middle of the month, we release data. Our annual data that we release for occupational wages usually comes out in the early summer. It's not as fixed a schedule as the unemployment rate and the industry job counts, which are put on a very precise schedule and for technical reasons. Those are the main ones, but we have a full schedule on texaslmi.com. Every year we post the release schedule for that year. We also have some quarterly data that comes out, but you can find that schedule on our website, texaslmi.com.
That's perfect. Awesome, Will. Thank you so much. Katie, we get everything?
Yeah, one last question for employers.
Sure.
So say I'm a small business owner and I'm really interested in all of this data. Who do I contact to help me make sense of it?
You can contact the Labor Market Information Department. We can help you. We have an email address that you can reach out to, and you can definitely contact us. You can contact your local workforce board, and your local workforce board can also help you get in touch with us.
Yeah.
Those are 2 good places to go.
Great question. And again, employers, you know, these are your vitals. These are vital statistics for labor information. It helps guide you make good decisions along with our legislators and policy advisors to help keep us going in the right direction and keep Texas expanding with our economy. So, Will, thank you so much. You and your team always appreciate our briefings every month. We look forward to them, and we also usually put out a press release from the Texas Workforce Commission on job growth and those market numbers too. So, definitely appreciate you coming and doing this episode with us today. Probably look forward to having you again later on in some other episodes where we can kind of get down into a little bit more details with some fun stuff in LMI info.
Well, it's always a pleasure being on the program, and thank you for your interest in all that we do.
Awesome. Let's wrap it up. Thanks, everybody. We appreciate y'all tuning in.